So welcome everybody to tonight's virtual presentation, Saratoga Soul Brantville Blues with author and educator Carol Daggs. My name is Patrick Stenshorn. I am the Director of Interpretive Programs at the Albany Institute of History and Arts. Tonight's program is based on Ms. Daggs' book, Saratoga Soul Brantville Blues, which has been named the 2021 Community Reads Choice by Saratoga Reads. This program was also scheduled. We are leading up into the weekend of Juneteenth. So this was sort of scheduled as sort of a precursor to many of the celebrations that are going on around the Capital Region in the region commemorating the official end of slavery in the United States, known as Juneteenth. So wherever you are in the region, I hope that you will consider going out and going to one of the many commemorations that are happening. I know down in downtown Albany, the Albany Institute of History and Art is a partner with the African American Cultural Center of the Capital Region and their Juneteenth programming this Saturday. Schenectady always hosts a great Juneteenth celebration, and Carol was mentioning that there will be a commemoration in Congress Park on Saturday afternoon as well. So we hope you are able to get out and attend one of those wonderful events. During tonight's presentation, we ask that you please mute your microphone. We will host a question and answer session with our speaker at the end of today's program. If you have a question you would like to ask and you feel comfortable unmuting yourself, please feel free to do so. If you do not feel comfortable asking your question, please feel free to type it into the chat box and I will then read any questions that come through to Ms. Daggs. Tonight's guest speaker is Carol Daggs. Carol is an educator and multifaceted creative whose gifts as a researcher and writer have begun to emerge. She was selected as a contributing author to publish Southern Saratoga Soul in the 2017 anthology Before They Were Our Mothers, Voices of Women Born Before Rosie Started Riveting. That book features 15 New York State women authors, which was edited by Patricia Nugent and published by the Journal Arts Press. As a dual pianist and vocalist, Carol has performed at Harlem's famed Apollo Theater, and on set she is known by the stage name Jazz Odds, the artful application of musical jazz sounds to the auditory apparatus and soul via vocal and instrumental flow. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Daggs.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are having a nice spring and a great week so far. After the storms, things have cleared up and just kind of gotten so nice out. So thank you for making time in your schedule to share in this Zoom because it's so nice out. You know, you could have made that choice to be out. So I also would like to thank the Albany Institute of History and Art and Mr. Patrick Stenshorn for hosting this evening. And I am just excited that we were able to collaborate on this June 17th date. And just a few invitations before we get started that if you are in the area on this weekend, for this summer, I've been blessed to prepare some events that are like an extension of the book. So this weekend for Juneteenth on Saturday and Father's Day on Sunday, I will be opening the Saratoga Soul photography exhibit in my backyard tent here in Brantville. So if you are interested in coming to see some of the images from the book and other ones that did not quite make it into the book, from noon until 4 on this Saturday and Sunday, I'll open that exhibit. And then ongoing through the summer on Mondays and Tuesdays from noon until 4, the exhibit will be on. That event is free and open to the public. but I also have 2 ticketed events that are available to participate in. And I have online tickets, but that will be at the end. But just so that you know, Monday is the Brandtville Boogie at 10 a.m. And it's a walking tour of the neighborhood here. It's about a mile and it lasts about 45 minutes. And I'll just be the tour guide and we'll get to take a look around at some of the original homes and some of the newer homes. And that starts here in Brantville and ends at the same place, basically the bottom of the driveway. I'll meet you outside. And then on Tuesday evenings, I'll be having tent events, and that mostly will consist of readings from the book. That starts at 6:30. So readings from the book. If you have your book, you may want to take a moment and have it handy during the presentation. And if you haven't gotten a book yet, or would like to get one as a gift for the dad in your life, or the grad or grads in your life, they're available for purchase online, and that will be available at the end. So thank you so much. I'll talk a little bit about my process with writing, and then we can just jump into the images, the slideshow. And some people were asking about how I came to decide to write Saratoga Soul Brantville Blues, which is an homage to my family and their lives and their legacy here in Saratoga Springs, but also my mother, who recently passed, and her upbringing in Beaufort, South Carolina, and how she came to be here in Saratoga Springs. So about 4 years ago, there was an open call at the Saratoga Arts Center for chapter stories that could be part of that anthology that Patrick mentioned, the Before They Were Our Mothers, Voices of Women Born Before Rosie Started Riveting. And I have, I think, maybe one more copy of this, but I do know that it's available at the Crafters Gallery in downtown Saratoga Springs. So if you're on tonight, Patricia Nugent, whose brainchild was this project, and all the fellow authors, 15 New York State lady writers, just want to say hello to everyone. And so I decided to revisit the anthology chapter that my mother and I collaborated on to tell her story here, and then repurpose the story as the introduction in Saratoga Soul Brantville Blues. And I'm not sure exactly what else to tell you about that, but those are my 2 main published pieces at this point. And I think we can go ahead and get started with the slides. If you'll take a look at the bottom left-hand corner as you look at the screen, down in the beige part of this map, and this is an 1879 map of Saratoga Springs, which is available through the Library of Congress archive. And I think our public library in the Saratoga History Room does also have this one. Oh, and while I'm speaking of the Saratoga Springs Public Library, I can say thank you to them for helping make this project possible. The Saratoga Springs History Room is an amazing space, and the wealth of information there can be overwhelming. So if you ever have a chance to stop in, it's on the 2nd floor of the Saratoga Springs Public Library. I'm shouting out my library tonight. And so let's go back to the map. Now, if you see in the left-hand corner of the map, there's like a bigger green square where the letters N and T are. And if you just drop down below the T, you'll see a horizontal line that says South Corporation Line. It's kind of little, so I know I probably will have to have my cheaters on to see that line, but I already knew it was there. So, so really, if you go below the South Corporation line, you'll see a squared off section that says I Brant, and then 15 allotments there. And that basically is the area where Brantville is. And the original residents referred to this area as Brantville based on the map. And for those of you who are familiar with Saratoga Springs, if you come into town from exit 13N off 87, you come in on the state park side of town from south going north. And once you get past the Avenue of Pines entrance to the state park, the next right-hand turn is Crescent Street. And basically the dog park is right there if you bring your dog sometimes. And this neighborhood is located between the dog park and the Racino. For those of you who know, you may know Pinnell's restaurant on Jefferson Street. So it's pretty much that entire area. And then if you turned onto Crescent Avenue, it'd be, you would pass Four Winds if you went to the Racino that way. All right, so Brantville, here we are. The images on the cover, I'll speak briefly about, but I think we'll revisit them during the slides. So from the left, moving to the right, we start with the gentleman that you can see in the garden, like he's just prepared some earth to plant. And that is my paternal grandmother, her uncle. So my father's mother's brother, Uncle Howard. All right, y'all with me? Some of this was driving me crazy during the research because you get to go back so far, and that is so blessed because so many folk maybe don't even know what their lineage is. So I feel blessed. Uncle Howard lived here in Brantville, and I'm blessed to be in the home that he built, which I received a Office of Community Development grant to upgrade about 25 years ago. So that house you can see in the background, there's like an outhouse and then a bigger house with a little chimney. That's where I am. And that picture is coming from the Joshua Road side, which is behind. It's like the backyard, but you wouldn't know it now because it's overgrown and the trees are kind of crazy. So let's move on to the right, and you'll see the couple, the lady in white and the gentleman. Those are my paternal grandparents. That's Grandpa Emery and Grandma Maud, my father's mom and dad. And you can see the contrast in their dress. They're dressed to work on the left side. And then moving over to the right, you can see them dressed, I say, in their Sunday best. Like, I don't know really what day that was or where they were going, but it's really a nice contrast with their car and in front of their home in Brantville. And if we move to the right, we see the little girl with the bow in her hair. This is my father's oldest sister. She was the first child born to Grandma Maud and Grandpa Emery. She was born in September 13th, 1911, and she graduated from Saratoga High with the class of 1929. And she just looks like a little doll baby. That's like one of my favorite pictures. She left Saratoga when she graduated high school to pursue dressmaking studies in New York City, and she stayed with family in Harlem at the time. She lived to be 101, and she passed away in 2012. And we had the fortune of living next door to her when we were growing up, because when she retired from Harlem Hospital, and where she worked as a social worker. After the dressmaking, she went back to college and pursued an undergraduate degree in social work, and she worked in admissions at Harlem Hospital, and she got all kind of stories about some of the things she encountered during that time. And because that really would have put her in in Harlem, I think really during the Harlem Renaissance time. So, that had to be pretty awesome. All right, so moving over to the picture with the four gentlemen, you can see my father who's standing with the guitar. He had a really nice Gibson, and next to him is seated with the guitar is his oldest brother, who was born second, Uncle Junie. He was born after Aunt Ethel. And I always laugh when I see this picture because he looks like he was out too late and just made it to the picture. If you see his expression. Then at the piano, turned kind of part ways, Uncle Donald, my father's older brother. And then cousin Al Sawyer is the gentleman closest to the front with like the sweater and the pretty wavy hair. And I understand that this image was taken next door at my cousin Henrietta's home. You can see on top of the piano all the 45 records. So they were very well studied with their music. And my Aunt Millicent's picture is the large picture on top of the piano. And the last image on the right is my mother, Ruth. And I mentioned she recently passed, and she was 89. And she was born and raised in Beaufort, South Carolina. And this picture, which is my favorite one of her, is from her high school graduation when she was in Brooklyn. At the time, she was a live-in domestic with a well-to-do Jewish family, and she attended evening school to finish her diploma. So that's her, her high school graduation. All right, so I'm gonna just go ahead and start the slides. Oh. And if you have the book, you'll know that the first chapter is A is for African burial ground, and that's on page 14. I passed through the book in abecedarian style, ABC, A to Z, and it was very helpful because keeping everything in chronological order was really stressing me out, and I had to find a way to make things flow and be fluid without sticking to a strict chronology. So that this is my hack, my ABC hack. All right, these images are courtesy of the National Park Service, the African Burial Ground, which is a national monument. And if you're ever down in Manhattan and have a chance to visit, it is so worth your time. I think right now they're in the process of reopening. Last time I did check, things were not fully reopened yet. But the transatlantic slave trade dispersed millions of Africans around the world, creating far-flung communities, a diaspora. Thousands were brought to New York City alone between the 1600s and the early 1800s. Their skills and labor and that of their descendants built the city and its wealth. And I was very taken by the images at the bottom. Chapter 2B is for Brantville. If you have your book, that starts on page 20. And then we revisit the cover image. And maybe you can see a little better on this map where the Brantville section is south of the city's South Corporation line. So at that time, anything south of Crescent Street was considered rural outskirts. So you can see it's like everything's green and then into beige. That's the rural outskirts. Chapter 5E is for Ethel on page 42. Again, we revisit on Ethel's baby picture, circa 1913. And I was just remarking that my grandmother Maud, she had a Singer sewing machine, and she made a lot of the family's clothing. So I'm convinced that she would have made this dress too. And I just am in love with this picture because she looks like a little baby doll. And then we fast forward to 1929, my Aunt Ethel's high school graduation photo, page 54 if you are following along in the book. Chapter 6, F is for family and farming, on page 46. We saw the image of Uncle Howard in the back of the home here, but there were gardens all throughout Brantville, and produce was supplied to local restaurants and the racetrack, of course, during season, which you know is going to be opening to fuller capacity this season. My grandparents also kept chickens and pigs, and they had cows, one of which was named Betsy. And I'm not sure if Betsy, the picture with Betsy is in this sequence. I can't exactly remember, but lots of farming. Some folks worked for the city as well. I know Uncle Howard was a city laborer, but it was nice to know that they were, more self-sufficient than you might guess. And, they were able to take care of each other and just kind of be independent and more autonomous here in Brantville. And my grandfather had a rubbish business, and he was a hackman, and he had a horse-drawn taxi. All right, so this is a revisit to one of the cover images. And again, Uncle Howard Wicks. And you can see the house and the outhouse. I'm so glad they put plumbing in on Doughton Avenue. And across the street, there are some structures. I can't exactly tell what they are. But also on this side of the street, I understand the chicken coop stood to the rear of this house. Like if you look right at Uncle Howard, the chicken coop would have been way over on the right-hand side where that earth ends. So I'm going to also just say that this area was also known as the gas lands later on. And basically it was an extension of the Spa State Park and the underground waters that had carbonic gas. And you might know from the history that the springs were over drilled and just kind of in some places ruined because the carbonic gas was such a commodity, to just get to be able to make soda and just bottle for bubbly water, that the environment basically got wrecked because of that. And this area, I think initially was not well built on because the water tables were so high. And I guess you couldn't dig very deep or people's basements would be flooding. So paternal great-grand Uncle Howard Wicks, tending to his garden. And this is page 50 from the book. Chapter 7, G is for grandparents, graduates, and girls, page 52. And we revisit the image from the cover. This is a little better view. And you can see that would have been the first rubbish truck that my grandparents had. And then again, it always just blows my mind when I see the difference in their work clothes compared to dress up. 10, J is for jam session, page 63. And again, we revisit this image a little more closely from the cover. Chapter 12, L is for lovely ladies, on page 73. And this is the lovely ladies of the Monarch Temple Marching Club on Congress Street, circa 1947, page 74. I'll just point out 3 of my aunts. They're really the only 3 people in the picture that I know who they are. On the far left, you see the tall lady with like the cat glasses and long puffy sleeves, kind of lace. That's my Aunt Margaret, one of my father's older sisters. Then if you go all the way across the back row, second in from the right, you'll see a lady with a, well, I guess they all have a corsage on, but kind of, she's between two ladies, but she's a little bit shorter. Aunt Ethel again in the back, and in the front, right in front of Aunt Ethel, is the lady with a sleeveless dress and a necklace, and that's my Aunt Janie. If some of you, maybe having lived in the capital region, may have crossed paths with my Aunt Janie. And the marching club I know did kind of sorority sisterhood kinds of things. And I think they would march in some of the Elks parades and so forth. And my mom did tell me that the lady sitting behind the back row on the right hand side with the glasses, she kind of has her hand up. My mom said that she was believing that that is Miss Hattie Mosley Austin, who owned Hattie's Chicken Shack, which is still here in Saratoga Springs. The Alexander family are the owners of Hattie's today, still on Filer Street, and they have some other locations. Chapter 16, P is for Papa, Parents, Play Pals, Pigs, and Potatoes, page 89. And this is a 1925 image of our grandfather, our paternal grandfather, Emery Daggs Sr. And just a little bit about him. He was actually born in Amsterdam. His father was William Daggs, and his mother was Eliza Hazard. And I think they had 4, maybe 5 children. In my research, I learned that they lost a daughter named Liliana. And when I went to get her death certificate, I got to visit the Green Hill Cemetery, which is in Amsterdam. And when their father passed away, I think my grandfather was, I think, just 2. So they came to Saratoga Springs, and I couldn't imagine, well, if they lived in Amsterdam, why they come, go all the way to Saratoga Springs? And then I learned more in my research that my Grandpa Emery's mother's family was already here from like the 1850s. So we go back quite a ways. And just to say a bit about my grandfather Emery's father, he was listed in the Amsterdam city directories as a tinsmith, a stove mounter, and I have a cousin who has a few images of him in like a leather apron. So he was a skilled laborer in metalworks, and he worked with hot metal. And after they came to Saratoga Springs, my grandfather's mother remarried, and they had another sibling who is a Morris. So I know they all had a younger brother, and I guess it was just kind of good, sad and unfortunate, but good at least to be home around your support system. All right. Brothers Richard left. That is my father, the shorter boy. And you can see the number 4 on the side of the house behind them. That's the house number for 4 Doughton Avenue. And I just laugh every time I see this picture, because I mentioned it to Patrick earlier that my father and his brother Joseph in the white shirt were 11 months apart. And, even when I was like a teenager, my dad and his brother were just so very close, all of them. But, quite often Uncle Joe would come over, or we would go over there, and I never saw this photo until, the last so many years. So when I think of that connection from childhood through adulthood, it's just really a beautiful relationship. But I look at those dusty, dirty boys, and I'm just like, bath time. All right, chapter 19, S is for supportive, sewing, sisters and sorrows, on page 100. And this is our late Aunt Henrietta. She passed away during 2020, right around March. And she's serving. She was always at the ready where service was concerned. And this is at her home on Ash Street. If you know the west side of Saratoga Springs, she had a beautiful home on Ash Street. And this just looks like a beautiful time, like I really would have liked to have been there. And my Aunt Margaret was married to Aristide Karen in 1949. So this is their wedding reception. And the lady with the flipped hair with her back to us, that's Aunt Ethel. And I really don't know who the fellow with the glasses is. But the lady with her arm extended, kind of pointing, that's Aunt Millicent from next door. And it's hard to tell who the gentleman in the white shirt is with the tie. I almost even want to say that those two gentlemen closest to the doorway, I want to say that that's my dad and my Uncle Joe, but I'm not positive. But in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the gentleman seated, and that's our paternal grandfather, Emery. And I always chuckle when I look at this picture and I say, yeah, that was probably one of the few times he ever got to sit down and everyone else is standing up. All right. And this again is my mother, Ruth, her high school graduation photo from Boys and Girls High School in Brooklyn. And I'm not sure what year that was. That would have been 40 something. I know she came to Saratoga. Maybe that was early 50s. But she came to Saratoga during the summer of 1947, as I understand. And quite a switch from rural, slower Beaufort, South Carolina to all this, sophisticated Saratoga Springs. And I've been reading some in my research from Miss Hattie, the Hattie Chicken Shack lady, and she talks about how fast Saratoga Springs was. So I can imagine the shift in everything for my mom must have been at sometimes overwhelming. So, you have to learn a whole new thing. And then she was written for to come to Saratoga to be a nanny, for the Winnie family that lived on Beekman Street. And the lady that we knew as Aunt Thelma and her husband, Uncle Chuck, Charles Winnie, when he finished his military service during World War II, they decided to settle here in Saratoga Springs and start their family. And I know he tended bar at one of the larger hotels, and she was a talented seamstress and a teacher. She actually was from Beaufort, South Carolina. So obviously, excuse me, she knew my mom and she sent for her because they had two daughters and their family was growing and they both worked. So they needed some childcare that was going to be reliable and, trustworthy. So that's one of my mother's legacies is her childcare. And I will just move to the next part. So this is really my dedication to my mom. And this is the dedication page from the front part of the book. To my beautiful mother, Ruth, and equally beautiful father, Richard. Thank you both for being the reason that I know what it is to be and feel loved. And also to all those beautiful people in the world who have, currently are, or will serve lovingly, dutifully, selflessly, and sacrificially in the role of principal caregiver. I think there's a couple more plates. All right. Sorry about that. And this basically is like my author page. And if you have interest in purchasing your copy of Saratoga Soul Brantville Blues, I do have this paper order form, which I could, send to you if you're not dealing with the computer so regularly and you'd like a paper copy, I could mail that to you or email it to you. Otherwise, on the website, orders are more immediately available. So you can see, I just invite you to please place your book orders online, and the HTTPS, it's saratogasoulbook.com, all one word. And if you have a review and you've had your book and you read it and you would like to just share maybe how it touched you, there's a place to reach out on the website where you are welcome to leave your review, or if you have a question that maybe wasn't very clear to you in the collection, I'll be happy to reach back and share with you. And if not online and you are local or close enough and you'd like to visit on one of the Brandtville Boogie Mondays or the Tuesday night tent events, or come and see the exhibit, you are more than welcome. And I look forward to seeing you and meeting you this summer. So my special thanks. I guess I have to click on this. So I'm closing with Saratoga Soul Brantville Blues. And the far left text basically is the press release for all the summer ongoing events that I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, the cover with the Saratoga Reads logo. And I just want to especially thank the Albany Institute of History and Art and Mr. Patrick Shenshorn. And just to say quickly, if you are interested in hosting me for maybe a patio or a porch or any kind of event where I could read, I am accepting engagement dates for the summer calendar. And if you're concerned about, my vaccination status, I can say this, that I have had my first shot and I will have my second shot on July 1st. So I can be maskless after July 1st. So again, thank you, Albany Institute of History and Art, Mr. Stenshorn, and everyone for making time in your schedule to join us for Saratoga Soul Brantville Blues. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Carol. We did have, thank you very much for your presentation. And I will say, Carol and I, a couple months ago, did a Zoom just to kind of chat about this program. And she showed me some photographs that were not included in today's presentation that were incredibly fascinating. Especially, I loved the one, I think you told me it was you thought it might have been your father in like a little baby carriage, a little stroller, and there was a taller strapping man with like sleeveless shirts and like a cow, I think. And you were telling me about that was probably whoever that was, one of your great uncles or somebody, was probably having to be watching your father and be tending to this cow. So if you have the ability to go see some more of these photographs in the tent show, I certainly encourage you to, because there are some really great photographs in there.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that one was Uncle Junie.
Yeah.
And they're so young and handsome and beautiful. I mean, they were always good looking people, but when you see them young, you're like, whoa. And them talking about everything they had to do, it's like really believable when you see the picture that they had crazy chores. And yes, that shirt, I think we made a joke about how torn up his shirt was.
Yes.
And I said it looks like Edward Scissorhands got him.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a wicker baby carriage, yes.
There is a question in the chat box from Holly, who asked, "Hi, Carol. How many families lived in Brantville?"
Well, I can't necessarily say over the years. It's then extended families with cousins. I can name some names: the Washington family, and some of the streets are named like Taylor Street, for families that I might not ever really have known, because either they they passed away by the time I came along or had moved away. So I'm thinking the Terrells, we're cousins on my father's side. Um, well, there's a friends of the family, the Moore family. They're usually here during the summer months and or on like longer weekends. Their home is one of the original homes that is still here. So I would have to do some really deep research. I mean, and depending on like what decade or decades to say how many families. Um, and even when I was a little girl, there was I grew up with John Anderson, whose family lived down the street, but they're no longer here, and their property is not there any longer. Mrs. Dudley, for those of you who may remember Mrs. Dudley, she cared for a number of foster children. And sometimes my mom would take me to visit, and, I'd have play pals for an hour or so. And, but mainly family, cousins on both sides of my grandparents.
Oh,
I don't know, maybe half a dozen. Sorry, I can't be more specific.
Okay, Chris, go. Chris, you wanted to make a comment or ask a question?
yes, hi. First of all, thank you so much for this presentation. I just loved it. It's so informative. There are many questions I would ask, but I won't ask them all now. But I'm really fascinated that your family, well, at least on one side, are from Buford, however you pronounce it.
Oh, yeah, Buford.
Buford, sorry. I've actually been there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a very, I thought, very beautiful area.
Yes.
But how did they, you may not know this, how was that, obviously the South, well, maybe the South and North aren't that different. I think we've learned that. But how did you ever know about the contrast between the two communities? Obviously, I'm just going to use my terms, black, white. I mean, what was that like for them to come north? Did they feel more liberated, or do you know?
Well, I think in my mother's case, I can speak to her experience. I think it really was quite a mind boggler
Yeah,
to have grown up in pretty much exclusively segregated upbringing.
right.
Her school was all Black, her teachers were Black, church was Black,
Right.
and everything they did was Black.
Well, this is when they were down in Beaufort.
Yes, in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Yeah. Sorry, Beaufort. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, did they find Saratoga? I think at one time Saratoga. Please tell me. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that. So,
Okay.
did they find Saratoga more liberal? That's probably not a good word, but open
Well, I
to
think
Africans.
there was a substantial African American community here.
Right.
At one point in some research I was just looking at,
Yeah.
even as small as it is now, I think it's like at 2.71% of
Oh,
the
yeah.
population. But I was reading back through some statistics, and I think at one point it was about 4%.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the highest percentage of African American community would have been, over the centuries.
Yeah.
But my mom, I think she really felt at home here partly because she had Aunt Thelma, who was from her
Right.
town.
Yeah.
That made a difference. But also, I think the rural agricultural
Hmm.
lifestyle here in Brantville, um, kind of matched probably a lot of what she experienced growing up
Yeah.
in Beaufort. And I know she got to take part in things like the annual Elks Ball, which was held at the casino in Congress Park. And she was involved in church. And
Was
then
the Elks Ball a mixed event, or?
I don't think so. And
Yeah, I just wondered. Yeah.
when I see the images, it's pretty much the Black Elks Ball.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All
Now,
right.
and the parade they had every year, I didn't know. I was blown away when I got to sit
Yeah.
with Miss Fitzgerald, the city historian, and I was looking at all these pictures. I said, "What is this?" And she said, "Oh, that's the annual, Black Elks Parade." So
Yeah.
my mom would have been able to attend things like that. And she had a social life here that was probably well and above what was available
Right,
to
right. I find it fascinating. By the way, I'm white. Okay, so just so you know, and I really appreciate your history and
Oh,
value
thank
it.
you.
And but also, my family was not. What do I want to say? They were workers. Okay, and my grandfather, great grandfather, worked in Tillman's Island. I know this isn't part of your story, but Tillman's Island in Maryland, in the Chesapeake. And, they were very much more, I'm not saying people were fairly treated. I don't think they were, but it's much more mixed workforce. And I just find it fascinating. And of course, I'm very interested and have been for 30 or 40 years. So I want to thank you for your commentary and story. And I'm so glad you discovered all of this. I think you worked hard. It was not easy, I'm sure.
Well, I was just
Thank
really
you.
blessed to have everyone like just feed me with their stories.
Yeah, yeah. And good for you for capturing a lot of it, and getting the pictures, the photos, and pulling that together. That is incredibly valuable for the future, for people to understand. So
Yeah,
thank you. I just so appreciate what you're doing, and thank you.
thank you. And if you're around this summer, maybe we'll get to meet.
I hope so.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. You
Yeah,
take care, and thank you very much.
you
Thanks,
all.
Chris.
Good.
Carol, how did you acquire all of the pictures that you used in the book and that you're displaying? Were they things that that came to you sort of naturally, or did you have to seek them out from cousins or other family members?
Well, a lot of them, I just had because they were in family circulation. But then, over the decade from like 2010 to 2020, um, really all of my father's siblings passed,
Mhm.
the remaining siblings that were still alive. And so I was fortunate and blessed to, during that time, acquire more photos. And then I began to um, post on my social media, as I think the first time was 2015 for the Saratoga Springs City Centennial. And my cousin tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I would like to do a project. And I thought, well, yeah, I have all these pictures. It's a shame to just, you know, have them just for me, and people really can need to know that there is an African American community here. There always was. And dating back to slavery, there was people don't even know that New York State was a slave state, from 1799 with the I want to say Emancipation Act for New York State,
Yep.
and then slavery, gradually ended, I think, by maybe 1826, somewhere in there,
1827. Yeah. Yeah.
1827. So it's really interesting to see the dynamic that, at least from the images that I have, they were late enough so that my family would be free citizens to just pursue their life, liberty, and happiness here in Brantville.
Do you still have other family members who live in Saratoga as well?
Oh yes, my cousin's right next door.
Okay.
I hear some people outside. I hope y'all can't hear.
I can't hear anyone. No.
Good.
Are those your cousins coming over?
I think it's nice enough that people are sitting out,
Yeah.
so we share a nice boundary, and we both have tents. So sometimes it's dominoes and all kind of fun stuff going on.
Great. Well, if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to either type them in the chat box, or if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself, please feel free to do that as well. Carol, what other resources? What other, what you said you've used the library's history room a lot. Where else have you done a lot of your research other than sort of your family stories and family papers?
Well, I was fortunate to be able to visit with Miss Mary Ann Fitzgerald. She is the city historian, and that archive is inside the visitor center downtown at the corner of Broadway and Congress Street, right across from the park. But unfortunately, that building hasn't reopened, and I don't know if it will this summer. I hope it will, but it was just so nice to be able to go in there. And like I said, the pictures that I'd never seen, the Elks Parade, and maps of things and articles that were really quite telling. The county history, I forget Miss Lauren's last name, but she's the county historian down in Boston Spa. I spent a good number of visits in the deed room, just to look up deeds and who the grantors and grantees were. And there is one mystery. I can't tell it all, but it's that the N is for Northumberland chapter 14, which I'm still, working on trying to figure out why one of the deed trails went totally cold. And I couldn't find any evidence of who the next grantee was. But that, I have to get a title search. So I'll keep you posted on the next episode of Saratoga Soul Brantville Blues.
There's a question that just came through from Beatrice in the chat box, wondering if you found any African American burial grounds in Saratoga.
Oh, in Saratoga, well, I can really only speak for my family. Most everyone is buried in the Green Ridge Cemetery, which is, right like a stone's throw from Brantville. Most everyone I did see. I tried to find Uncle Howard and his brothers, Emmett Howard and Eugene, because it seems from some of the photocopies I have that they're buried in Northumberland, where they were born. And I did find some evidence that at least one of them was baptized in the Dutch Reformed Church, which was in Northumberland at the time. I don't think it's a formal congregation any longer. But and like it's them because you see next to their name, colored or Negro or Black.
Right.
So that's them. So.
Well, thank you, Carol, so much for your presentation tonight and for all of your information. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing more about your family stories. I absolutely encourage, as I said earlier, everybody to get a copy of the book, to absolutely go check out the pop-up the tent exhibit as well with some more of the photographs, because like I said, there are some other ones that are great. And I know if Carol's there, she's going to have a lot of other stories because she did it for me virtually a couple months ago. So absolutely, I encourage anybody who's available to go to the tent show or to any of those other special events that Carol mentioned as well. So Carol, thank you so much for your presentation tonight. And I thank you everybody for attending this evening. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their evening.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I hope you have a great summer.
Yeah,
and if you have any questions, please reach out via the website, which is saratogasoulbook.com.
Well, thank you, Carol. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your evening. And I'm going to give the virtual round of applause here for you, Carol, because it was a fantastic presentation. So thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you so much. My pleasure.
Have a great night.
All right. Thank you, and you.
Bye.